It is a season for us, a season of transitions. And the scripture that came to mind for me was Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. Now, Ecclesiastes can be a little difficult to understand. It sort of wanders around, rambles, repeats itself, just like life does sometimes. And some people have described it as a wild goose chase without a goose. Now, I don't know about that, but anyway, it can be hard to understand because it does ramble some. And the part that we're going to be talking about talks about all the things that occur in life that occur at maybe certain times, maybe they're planned, maybe they're not. So I will be reading Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to tear down, and a time to sow, a time to keep silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. Now, I know many people, and myself included, sometimes some of those words, a time to hate and a time for war, but I think the author is saying, that's life. It's not saying that's something we should purpose to do, but that's life. Now, in thinking about transitions and times of life for people, I couldn't help but remember something I read by a man who I read every once in a while. He's 87 years old, and he has been a writer, a poet, various things. And he was going to his 65th college reunion. He had graduated in 1961. Now, I'm going to my 65th in October, but that's for high school. And as many small colleges do, they had two classes having their reunion, and the other class was the class of 2021. So, quite a different group. And he was talking to the group, and he said, there's three different age groups. And I want especially you that graduated in 21 to hear this. There's the youth, and there's the middle age, and then there's the you look great group. Now, what I'd like for you to do is look at a couple of people. It won't be too hard to find that group, and tell them you look great. Well, and you look great out there, too. So many of us are in that you look great group. Sometimes when there's a transition, people take different paths, or churches might take different paths. Sometimes they discuss it, and that's good if we don't discuss it to death and go no farther. Sometimes people are fearful of even mentioning it, and they're silent. Sometimes people keep saying, well, if we could just get back to the way things used to be, we'd be okay. And I've heard that, not necessarily here, but I've heard that over the years. And then there's some people that say, maybe it's time to try something a little unexpected. Now, my example of the unexpected may not be it may be a little more impulsive than what the church needs to do, but I thought I'd throw it out there to you. On Memorial Weekend, I went to Wichita with two friends to visit who I call my crazy niece, and she calls me her crazy aunt, in Wichita. And so we had one middle-aged person and three you look great persons together celebrating. And so we were walking around doing some things, and she ran into where there was a carousel, and a friend of hers was running it. And first thing I thought of when I saw it, it's like, I wonder if we can get on that and ride it. And so her friend said, if your friends want to ride, I can give them a free ride. So we got on, we rode the merry-go-round, had a good time. A few of you have seen the Facebook picture that I posted. But I didn't get the picture that I should have, or the video. Our feet are a little bit bigger than the ones that were planned for the stirrups of those horses. And this one member of our group had a little thicker soles on. So on getting off, she brought her leg over, but the foot that was in the stirrup was stuck. So she was hanging there, holding onto the pole with her leg dangling. And my niece, Lisa, went over to help her. And I could have gotten a really good video then, but I missed it. I didn't even think about it. But, there was no harm done. Lisa got her out of her predicament, and we went on having had a good time and something we remember. Now, in the church, we might not be ready to try something, quite as I say, impulsive, but there are things we can do. One of the things I noticed last week is that people were standing around and really enjoying talking to each other. Now, we do that every week, but maybe it was just me observing. I felt like it was happening a little bit more last week than it had. And that's a good thing. But we also need to think about, how can we bring more people into our discussion, into interacting after church or at some other point. Sometimes some people sort of shy away. Sometimes, of course, sometimes someone has something to do afterwards and all. But we might think about that and think about other things we might do. And I know that sometimes, as small as we are, and in our exhausting 24/7 world, we get really tired, and we're in that age group that we don't have the same energy we had. But I read something from, this was a young man, but it could work for any church. He mentioned the fact, and he's in a church that has all different groups of people, ages, and he said, one of the things you need to know is that your website, and maybe we could say your Facebook page, is your front door. That's the first place people will go if they don't know anything about your church, to think about whether they think they might be interested in coming. Now, probably most of us don't think of that as the first thing we would do. I sometimes do that with organizations that I'm not familiar with, but I've never thought of doing that as the first thing with a church. But he says, yeah, that's what they're going to do. And one of the things he said, if these are people that haven't been to church in a long time or don't understand church jargon, they need an explanation in non-church jargon of what we do and how we do it. And he said, some things, if they come here and don't have a clue, they can even, now this particular young man was Episcopal, but he said, some of the things we do can seem really weird to them. And I was thinking about the time that I sat next to a young man, it was probably at least a year ago, maybe a little longer, and as it turned out, he had never, ever been to a church service. And so he was asking me, what does the word invocation mean? What does doxology mean? What does, and I don't know what all the things. And we had a few minutes before the service started, and I gave him some definitions, and I said, if there's anything else, let me know. But there can be people that come that have never been in church. And do we help bridge that gap? And then the website also. And then this young man said, the next thing they will do before they come in person, they will join you in streaming services for several weeks, some of them maybe several months, before they decide if they're going to come in person. And, I don't know how I need to sometime listen to our streaming service. I haven't listened to it, but that's another thing that we might consider. He also gave some things that I hadn't thought about for how we can welcome people that might be a little different than what we've done in the past. Not saying, he wasn't trying to say anything that what we have been doing is wrong. It's just that maybe we need to look at it in a little different way at times. We need everybody's gifts, all of the gifts out there, all of the wisdom out there to help us through this time. I know that we have limits. Speaking of limits, the size of my print is 20. It would have been 12 a couple of years ago. So, you all know that I have limitations. Anyway, we have limitations, and we need to work within them. There's a writer that I hadn't heard of for a long time. Her name is Phyllis Tickle. She was one of the early writers about some of the changes that were happening in society that were affecting the churches. And one of the things she'd said is that maybe we need a great rummage sale. Now, she wasn't talking about just getting rid of stuff, and we may have stuff to get rid of too. But she was talking about baggage, what kind of baggage we might be carrying into the future that might not be helpful. And I have no list of what that baggage is or what that stuff is. I'm just throwing out some ideas. And she said, we can take what really is useful, what we really need into the future. But if we try to carry everything, then we'll be loaded down and we won't be able to reach out to younger people. You can remember how Jesus, as he taught people, he sometimes snuck away and went to the wilderness. His disciples would say, "We were looking for you. Where were you?" Well, maybe sometimes we need to sneak away to the wilderness too. Our wilderness won't be like his was, where he went. Actually, the wilderness in that area is almost semi-desert. It's not like we might picture a lot of trees, but it's very barren. It has a beauty all of its own. But people used to go out to the wilderness to find silence. And in this day of 24/7 news and noise and chaos that we hear about, we all need some time to rest in the silence of God and listen for that call, for what it comes next. Sometimes we need some silence to heal. And our wilderness may be our deck. It may be a special room in our house. It could be going outside someplace other than that. And I have to tell you, I spent a little time in the wilderness as I was praying about this sermon. And the word that kept coming to me as part of the transition is hope. Now, hope is not the same as optimism. And we can have hope and still be sad, frustrated, and angry sometimes. But we're taking the long view. When we have hope, we're not saying what's going to happen in the next 3 months. Sometimes we would like that to change radically in the next 3 months. But we're just saying, I have hope that God is in this and that He is working through it in some way. And it takes discipline. And so what I'd like to share with you in closing is that I just send a message out every once in a while. I do this and say, what do you think? What keeps you hopeful? What do you have that brings hope to you? And so this is a combination of some of my thoughts and some other people's thoughts that might help us in this season of transition, of change, hope, whatever we find it to be for us. And they said, I remember that the tough seasons don't last forever. And remember that sometimes something is happening that we don't see yet. And yet, at some point, we will become more aware of it. And it may help us understand what God is doing, or it may just help us hang on for a little longer. And then we trust that God can work through both the negative and positive things that occur to bring good to our congregation, to us, and to the people of Maryville. So as we sing our closing hymn, 518, I'd like to suggest that we reflect on what is God calling us to? What gives us hope? What is the root of our hope? How will we live that hope out as we go from here to serve and to continue as church at First Christian Church at 3rd and Buchanan?